In a world where it seems that everything has already been photographed, why bother becoming a photographer at all? Let's have a closer look. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 806 for Thursday, January the 11th, 2018.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, alright, from the top floor.
Hey, hello and welcome. This is Chris Marquardt. You're listening to Tips from the Top Floor, the longest running photography show on the planet. I'm Chris, and this is episode 806. Why bother being a photographer? Well, why bother? we'll try to find an answer to that. Last episode, I briefly mentioned that I didn't know how long the 804 episodes of Tips from the Top Floor were, and that it was probably a bad idea to go back and listen to all of them. And of course, who better than Release Pixie Matt Rafsitar-Armstead to keep track of that, to keep the books. He's just the best. He just replied with an email saying, oh, by the way, the 805 main episodes are 341 hours, 17 minutes and 13 seconds of content. That is 14 days. That's 2 weeks nonstop listening to this show. That's 2 weeks nonstop. Yeah. But you have to sleep in between, so you can easily double that. Anyway, not sure. 341 hours. Anyone should do that. So if you're new to this show, hey, just start listening right now. This is your first episode. What else has happened? New episode of The Future of Photography is out, talking about computational photography and getting some great feedback on that little podcast, The Future of Photography, together with Aid Stock. Love doing that. It's just a nice journey into some new tech and interesting tech and what that implies into what that means for the future of photography. It's great to do these thought experiments. On this show, why bother being a photographer? Let's hear Ross and his 2 questions.
Hi, Chris. My name is Ross, and I'm a photographer based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you so much for the TFTTF podcast. It's excellent content, and it's both entertaining and educational. You've no doubt helped tens of thousands of people across the globe improve their photography skills, including myself. So with that said, I have 2 questions for you today, and they're kind of long, so I apologize. My first question is, in the last couple decades, photography has become an art and trade that's extremely saturated. There are literally millions of photographers on the planet. So even if you're a, quote, master photographer, unquote, who can take the most beautiful and pristine shots, you're still competing against tens of thousands of other people who can do arguably the same thing. And there are a few places and things on the planet left that haven't been photographed, in my mind. So thinking about that kind of makes me extremely demotivated when it comes to photography, and it makes me have thoughts like, why bother being a photographer? Why bother shooting this? It's already been photographed a million times before by other people. So do you have any thoughts, I guess, on overcoming those mental hurdles and staying motivated even when it seems like we're moving closer and closer to a time when even non-photographers can take pretty good photos with just their phones? And then I guess a follow-up question.
Okay. Let me chime in here. Thanks, Ross. That's really good questions. It's okay. Let me try to break that down into a few things, because I've been at that point. I think everyone has been at that point. There are millions of photographers out there. And even if you're a master photographer, yes, you're right. There is competition. Of course, that always depends on where you want to go, what you want to achieve. Lots of people are just happy with taking photos, but they do not have the ambition to be seen, to be noticed, to become like the world's best photographer. When I was 20, I wanted to be a rock star. And I did play in bands, and I had a ton of fun, but it never came to fruition. And looking back at it from now, it's like, okay, sure, it wasn't meant to be. You say that most of the things out there have already been photographed, and that is kind of demotivational if you look at it from that perspective. But and phones are sufficient to take great photos these days. But of course, the tech is one side of the photography. There's always the photographer and the skill of the photographer. Even if it's technically perfect photography, it's still on you to find the right framing, to find the right moment, and so on and so forth. And you're right. I mean, yes, there are millions out there. There is competition. That's what you get with the whole process of the whole thing of photography being democratized. There's a democratization of the market. There's more amateur photographers who now have access to what we call pro gear. And it doesn't need to have pro on it. Even the cheapest entry-level DSLR can take professional photos. It's 90% of the photography is in the photographer, not in the gear. More professional lights are cheap. Education is everywhere. Go online. Listen to this podcast. Go on YouTube, and you'll find a ton of education. You might need some better skills, some better curation skills to tell the good from the bad. But in general, it's all available, and that will produce more photographers, yes. And back in the good old days, you had to have, of course, the skill. You'd have to have marketing skills, the photography skill, the marketing skills, and the third, the business skills to make your way up that ladder. Today, that skill set has shifted a bit, but you will still need the photography skill. You still need to be a skilled photographer. The marketing skills, I think you still need those, yes. And the business skills, you still need those. Being just a great photographer is often not enough, and that has not changed. Now, those skills mean that the skills have changed over time. Maybe the photo skills may not so much be so much important. But the marketing has definitely changed. There's much less like print marketing, more online, more internet platforms, social media, podcasts, and this kind of stuff. So the things shift, but they do not change really. But your first question was about how to get motivated in a time when it feels like everybody else has already photographed everything. Well, let me tell you a story that happened to me, and that goes back to Nepal, which is where my whole travel photography photo tour thing started in 2009, when John Miller, my friend, took me to the Khumbu trek in Nepal up to Mount Everest Base Camp, which was an amazing experience. It was a great cultural experience, a great photographical experience. And it left me with that feeling of I've taken it all in. I've covered this. Then 5 years later, in 2014, we decided to do, we did another trek, the Gokyo trek, which we decided to come back down the Khumbu trek, the same trek we did in 2009, with the same locations, the same people living along the trek, the same kind of things to see. And I was really worried. I was really afraid to go back to that same place because I didn't know if I would find different photos, if I'd find just the same things. And so I went there with the goal to see the place from a different angle. And it worked. I was so happy that it worked when I returned home with my photos. It turned out it's definitely possible to see things from different angles. And that is my goal now. When I do a repeat, and I don't do repeats a lot. I said that in an earlier episode a while ago, that I typically take to go to the same place only twice because I want to see something new. Now, I've done one or two more times often, but let's look at Lake Baikal in Siberia, or let's look at Donegal. Going back there means seeing the place with new eyes. Actually, it means being able to see the place with new eyes because you know what you already shot in the first place. And the same is true when you look around at other people's photos of a place. If you go there, you bring your own set of eyes. You bring your own backpack, the conditioning you have, your own history, your own culture, and you will see that with your own eyes. Now, of course, you can strive to take the exact same photos that others did, but That's never the goal for me. At the same time, I'm not too disappointed if I take a couple of those cliche shots because, well, sometimes you just got to take those shots. What you can do is you can practice in your own backyard. Your own backyard, the most boring thing you know, and try to see it with new eyes. That can be a bit of a frustrating exercise, but if you manage to see that with your own eyes and see it in a different light, then you are on the right track. And also, you as a photographer, I think you should strive for constant growth. It's not something that, well, that's at least what I do. It's not something that I don't ever want to reach that moment where I think, oh, now I know it all. Now it's over. Now I am at the pinnacle of something. No, it's constant development. It's constant learning of new things. It's changing of the way I see things. And I always try to improve in some way. I do this every year. I look back at the photography of that year, take my time, look at it, and decide for myself, have I improved? Have I changed in a way that I appreciate and that makes me feel good? And so far, it has worked every year. I always learn. I always try to find ways to look at things from different perspectives. So even if I go to a place that seemingly everybody else has been to before, I bring my own perspective. And if I go back to that place a second time, I bring my own new perspective. And that motivates me. And it took that Nepal experience from 2009 and 2014 for me to realize that I will always be able to see the world around me through eyes that nobody else sees the world through, just me. Anyway, second part of your question.
And then I guess a follow-up question to that is portfolio related. Do you think most, quote, successful, unquote, photographers have a good specialty? In other words, for example, David LaChapelle, if you've heard of him, was one of my favorite photographers who would shoot celebrities in these kind of bizarre, over-the-top studio spaces that were really colorful. And that was kind of his specialty and the thing that kind of made him successful. And I feel like if he had done more of a variety of photos, like landscapes and macros and journalistic photography and other things, then he maybe wouldn't have been as successful as he is now. So do you think it's important for photographers to specialize, I guess, in a certain type of look in order to have a kind of an eye-catching portfolio? Or have you ever seen any photographers that are still successful, but they kind of dabble in everything? So those are my two questions. Sorry, they're super long. Hopefully that makes sense. And all the best from Minneapolis. Okay, thanks. Take care.
Thank you. Specialization. I mean, what is success? Let's try to define success first, because that is something very different for different people. And your question, is it important to specialize to be successful? Well, David LaChapelle is known for his lush constructed photos and bright colors and meticulously composed shots, and that's his trademark. But trust me, to get there, he went through everything that other photographers went through as well. I bet that's what he did. I'm sure he shot landscapes, he shot portraits, he dabbled with product photography. I don't know. He learned his skills, and he was always on the lookout for his own style, probably, and that's what he strived for. And the photos he's known for today are the result of a process, of a path. The problem with these successful people is always that there is no overnight success. They take time to develop. I don't know which band said it, but one band once said it. We are our overnight success was 10 years in the making. And with a lot of things, that is true. So it probably took many years for David LaChapelle to be where he is. And he went through a lot of trial and error. And he went through a learning phase that took a long time. And the thing is, everyone who is known for something probably didn't set out to be known for that. And they had plenty of other things going on in their career. I mean, look at what I do. Okay. First of all, I cannot specialize on a specific kind of photography. I teach photography. I do workshops on street and landscapes and icescapes and people and film photography. But what do you know me for? I would bet most of you listening, well, all of you listening to me, to this podcast right now, will know me obviously for being a podcaster. You might know me for talking about photography on several podcasts because that's what I do. And that's what I'm most visible for. You'll probably be aware that I travel a lot and that I sometimes travel to icy places, to the Arctic maybe, or to Siberia. And sometimes I go to high mountains and do some hiking there with photographers and some trekking and some landscape photography and some cultural photography where I go. But I bet most of you are not aware that I'm a musician as well. I'm a bass player. Now, I've said this several times on the show, so I guess a certain percentage of you will know that. But most of you will not know that I love to cook, that I dabble in electronics, that in the past I used to work in the software industry, and that I can probably edit faster in VI than most of you. That's my claim to fame. No, I'm serious. This is a super nerdy skill, but yeah, I do have that in me as well. So what I'm trying to say is this. Often people who are in the public eye are known for something. And while it might be beneficial to have like a thing or a style, something that defines you, I don't think you can really force that. A lot of what you see from other photographers is mostly your perception. And while someone like David LaChapelle seems to be only doing this kind of thing, I'm sure it's just the thing that he's most visible for. Here's a good example. Ansel Adams. Who doesn't know Ansel Adams? What do you know him for? Well, for his Yosemite National Park photos. And if you're a bit deeper into photography, you will probably also know him for some of his books, The Negative, The Positive. What most of you might not know is that in the 1940s, he also did street photography in LA. There's photos out there, and it's good stuff. So Ansel Adams had a development, and he kept learning, and he kept developing into the photography he ended up being known for. I believe if you follow your heart, if you listen to yourself, and if you seize opportunities when they unfold, your path will kind of naturally lead you to something. That's at least what works for me. I've never really tried to steer my photography towards some sort of specialization. Instead, when I came to a fork in the path, and every time I come to a fork in the path, I usually try to let my heart decide which way to go. And that's how I ended up here. And the journey is far from over. Hey, that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. You can find more information at tipsfromthetopfloor.com, or if that's too long to type, use the shortcut tfttf.com. I'm always happy to answer your questions, or at least try to find an answer. Get your voice on the show, record it on your smartphone, and send it to voice@tfttf.com. That's voice@tfttf.com. I want to hear from you. And of course, if you want to join the other listeners who support Tips from the Top Floor, go to tfttf.com/support. Your help is what makes this show possible. tfttf.com/support. Thank you so much. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, silent partner and Hans Petter Kagroyd, publishing and Slack challenges by Release Pixie, Matt Rester Armstead, Slack invitations by Chief Invitation Officer, CIO Rusty Russ. My name is Chris Marquardt. Follow me on Facebook and on Twitter at Chris Marquardt. That's Chris MarQuardt. And of course, go out and take amazing photos. Don't forget to be nice to each other. And happy shooting.